Welcome back to the BlackTrack, where I do commentary and review on movies with an all-black cast, or at least a black lead. Whenever I think about the movie Class Act, I'm always reminded of the fact that it hit theaters exactly 1 week after another movie with a confusingly similar name. I was attending a summer camp at the time, and as naive and stupid kids, we actually believed that the counselors were going to take us to the movies to see Class Act. What we actually ended up going to see was Sister Act. I'm a grown man now, so it goes without saying that I got to see Class Act a bunch of times since then. Class Act is a 1992 film starring rap duo Kid and Play, yet another one of their buddy comedy movies. This one sandwiched in between House Party 2, which released in 1991, and House Party 3, which released 2 years later in 1994. Class Act is about two teenagers, a genius named Duncan Penderhughes, played by Christopher Kidd Reed, and a juvenile delinquent named Blade Brown, played by Christopher Play Martin, whose identities get swapped, forcing them to live each other's lives. Now you might think that the movie Class Act is an original story, but it's actually loosely based on the 1881 novel The Prince and the Pauper by Mark Twain. The movie is extremely funny, but watching it back subsequent years since its release, I always notice things that absolutely do not age well for modern viewing. There's a bunch of things in this film that age like a fine milk, as you'll soon see, and that's why I always recommend watching movies in the context of the time it was released. It's a shame a movie like this could possibly be dismissed because of modern sensibilities, because the cast did a great job with it. There's hardly a bad performance in it, and aside from Kid and Play, it stars Loretta Devine, Alicia Rogers, Dougie Doug, Rhea Perlman, Karen Parsons, and many more. Class Act may not be as beloved as Sister Act, and it may have made way less money at the box office, but does that mean that it's not a good movie? Let's BlackTrack and find out. Whose idea was it to make the Class Act theme sound like some workout music? I'm in the mood to do some jazzercise after that. There's two guarantees about a Kid and Play movie. One is that they're always going to do a freestyle, and second is that somebody is going to go behind bars. If you say that nobody was behind bars in House Party 3, let me remind you that the guys who catered the bachelor party literally ran a business behind bars. This is one of those movies that starts at the end and tells you everything that leads up to this point. Normally, I hate this, but here, I'm genuinely intrigued to find out how Duncan here got behind these bars, especially since he's guarded by a guy who looks like he could eat him at any moment.
That hamburger sure looks good.
Tastes good too, punk.
The guard is played by Andre Rosie Brown, a guy known for playing heavies in films, no pun intended. Sadly, he passed away in 2006. Unfortunately, you're going to hear me say that a lot during this video, because the sad thing about watching Class Act these days is the realization that the majority of the cast has passed away, which definitely sucks that such talented people are just gone. We go way back to the past, while Duncan explains how he and Blade grew up in two totally different ways, with both excelling at a bunch of things to be fair, just with slightly different intentions you could say. The part that always confused me is the scene where Blade is peeping at a girl getting undressed in the bedroom. At no point is it established that any other woman other than his mom's lives in this house. So who is this girl? Duncan says that Blade was looking next door. So did he literally break into a house so he could peep through a keyhole? I mean, it's alright if he did, because it's on code for his character. It's just, damn, the dedication. All of that debauchery got Blade Brown sent to juvenile hall, but all is not lost. Parole officer Reichert tells him that he's getting out under two conditions. One, that he completes high school, and the other, he cuts his hair. But he's not happy about that one. Officer Reichert is played by, and I know I'm gonna jack this up, Rick Duckerman? I don't know. Sadly, he passed away in 2015 after a decent little career in some memorable movies. On the flip side, Duncan is the head of his class, probably the smartest guy in the state, and is being courted by a prestigious college. Only they're apprehensive because he can't pass PE. Never in my life have I heard such nonsense. One thing about PE, oh, they gonna make sure you pass that motherfucker. Even if you gotta play dodgeball the entire semester, so be it. It's especially silly if you're considered a genius. Yes, so Mr. Einstein, it says here that you failed to do a layup in gym class, and when asked why you couldn't, your response was, well, white men can't jump? To make matters worse, Duncan and his parents moved to a new town, so Duncan must attend a new school where he knows nobody. But somehow everybody not only knows him for being so smart, but they also know of Blade for being the biggest badass in the city. He even has his own theme song. It's kind of a bone of contention for me with this movie because so many people know these guys' reputations but yet have no idea what they look like. I like to call it Schrodinger's classroom because they both are and aren't well known depending on who's interacting with them. I guess that's what makes it so easy for their school records to get mixed up and for everybody to believe that one is the other despite both of them failing the eye test miserably. Even the security guard for the smart side of the school doesn't believe Blade is a genius. I know I buried the lead there, but yeah, there's basically a bouncer for the nice side of the school. Contrast that with something that gave me flashbacks to a time when they would separate the, shall we say, difficult students at the school. When Duncan ends up at what looks like bathrooms at your local Little League park. I wouldn't be surprised if these external shots are exactly that, because the two entrances are a dead giveaway. Duncan gets immediately harassed by a guy named Popsicle, who's played by Dougie Doug, who I'm happy to report is still alive, and who was 1 year away from possibly his biggest role ever in Cool Runnings. At the same time, Blade is being treated like a king, or maybe more accurately, a prince, because a girl in his class named Ellen is a total sapiosexual and is enamored with dude. Ellen is played by Cameron Parsons, who ironically is playing completely against type here since she's incredibly smart, rather than the dumb valley girl she played on The Fresh Prince. I like it, it shows range. It's not all bad for Duncan though, because once it's revealed that he's Blade Brown, Demita, the girlfriend of Wedge, the present toughest guy in the school, takes a liking to him and openly flirts with Duncan right in front of her boyfriend's face.
Well, I heard about you and Sherelle from Rwanda. Who told Devon, who told Cecilia, who told me that you had it going on. And Sherelle told LaWanda, who told Devon, who told Aletha, who told me that you know how to do things that she never dreamed about doing.
All of these damn girls supposedly had sex with Blade Brown, but not one of them described what he looks like? I gotta say that's cap. Speaking of Wedge, he's played by Lamont Johnson, a staple in black movies. But enough about him for right now. His girlfriend is played by Alicia Rogers. Damn, she right on time, ain't she? It's so amazing to me that Alicia Rogers is so well known in the black community and so beloved, but to this day has only done 2 movies. This one and Boys in the Hood. That speaks to her commanding presence on screen if you ask me, and it's a shame we didn't get more movies from her. But hey, it's not too late. She's still with us and is only 47 years old. At least Duncan is getting hit on by girls his age. Blade, on the other hand, is getting casually propositioned by his teacher, played by Rhea Perlman. The movie doesn't even treat it like it's weird. Earlier, the assistant principal, played by Simply Marvelous, even judges the students' pictures for attractiveness. There's actually a term for this, called ephebophiles, which is when someone is attracted to older teens, like 18 or 19-year-olds. But it's a very weird and thin line that the movie class act decides to walk for 2 insignificant characters. Speaking of Simply Marvelous, I didn't get enough time to talk about her at length in my video for House Party 3, but she was a very funny and underrated comedian in the 90s. That's right, I said was, because she sadly passed away in 2018. Duncan might be a genius and everything, but it took him way too long to figure out that something wasn't right. And when he tries to head straight for the principal's office, Blade intercepts him and literally threatens to murder Duncan if he tells anybody about the mistake. See, Blade theorizes that Duncan can continue to be him so that he can graduate, and in return, he can keep being Duncan and help him pass PE. Don't think too hard on how this would work logistically by the end of the school year. I'm just impressed that Class Act gives both characters legitimately good motivations to drive the plot. That's not really common in movies like this. The premise is simple, but for whatever reason, Blade has to complicate it. Like, I get situations like having to beat up bullies before they get to Duncan and expose him, but I don't understand why they have to swap transportation, clothes, and even teeth. Ugh. He claims it's to keep his reputation, but once again, we've established already that his reputation isn't tied to his appearance because nobody knows what the hell he looks like. Somebody explain to me why it seems like Blade went straight from the jail to the school and not home first. Is that protocol? I bet you can't guess who Blade's mother is. It can only be one of 2 women in 1992. If you said the grand matron of the missionary of mothers herself, Loretta Devine, then congratulations. You just won a trip to the next scene, where Duncan's parents contemplate if he's gay or not, because they hear weird sounds coming from his room when Blade comes over to show him how to dress. I gotta say, out of all the things this movie does that doesn't age well, including misogyny, sexual harassment, and even implied pedophilia, this probably ranks at the top of the list of the things that would keep this movie in development hell in today's world. It probably wouldn't be so bad if it didn't appear like Duncan's father was gonna pass out during the entire movie at the mere thought of it. Duncan's father is played by Mesach Taylor, and I think him not being here anymore bothers me more than most, because I grew up with a mother who watched Designing Women religiously. Plus, he was great in those mannequin movies. Sadly, he passed in 2014. His wife in this movie is played by Marianne Alda, and here's some trivia. She was the girl in the beginning of The Wiz who had just had the baby with no context. It feels like Class Act was met with a bit of a dilemma in the story department, because with Blade and Duncan being juveniles, it probably limits the amount of situations you can put them in. So in an effort to ignore that reality, the movie basically pretends like they're adults and have them going to nightclubs and stuff and interacting with people who are obviously supposed to be way older. It stands way out when you put it next to the beginning of the movie. But then again, it's very believable that Blade has been held back several times, so that Negro could be 23 for all I know. He's even got grown associates named Fruity and Go-Go, and Fruity is played by Brahman from the Fifth Floor, Reginald Ballard himself. No matter what Blade tries, he just can't seem to make Duncan cool, so he sits him down and tries to give him a crash course. There's some parts of it that makes adult me cringe.
You don't hit on a girl, you be hitting on a bitch!
But then there's other parts of it that I think are hilarious. The Who's on First routine by Abbott and Costello has been done and copied to death over the years, but I like the hip-hop spin that Class Act puts on it.
Let's say I'm on a plane to New York. Would I be fly on the plane to New York?
Well, that depends.
Depends on what?
On what you be wearing.
I'd be fly if I dress a certain way?
That's right.
That answer's stupid.
Thanks.
Are you deaf?
Man, I'm the deafest brother on this block.
You're deaf.
That's right.
Something that I've always liked about Class Act is the clever way it handles its character arcs. Duncan sucks at sports, but when the coach tells him to kick a football, his knowledge of physics kicks in, and he ends up booting that bitch into the next semester. Blade sucks at everything academic, but when the science teacher tells him that he has to do a dissertation, he kills it talking about his love for cars and applying it to sex. It would have been real easy for the movie to just have them stumbling through the things they have no knowledge of. So you have to applaud them for finding a cool way to apply their strengths. Speaking of strength, or lack thereof, after two beatdowns, Wedge turns into a straight up literal punching bag, physically and verbally.
Yo, Demeter, I thought you were gonna play with my frog.
Your frog ain't jumping in my direction.
Demeter, I thought you was gonna play with my frog.
Hey, at least he gets to keep his theme music. Now, if there's one thing I can't stand, it's colorism in black movies, and I was ready to criticize Class Act for reinforcing it, but they pulled a switch on me and reeled it in when I least expected. Early in the film, it was looking real bad, since Blade and all the supposed low income and bad students, including Demeter, had darker complexions, whereas Duncan and the rich and so-called gifted students all had lighter complexions. Then when they go on dates with the two female leads, they even put Demeter in a low-income neighborhood and Ellen in a fancy high-income community. I think they knew it was a bad look, which is why when we get to know the girls a little better, it's revealed that Demeter is actually the one who has the smart and gifted side, and that Ellen is actually quite the freak and keeps throwing sexual innuendo at Blade.
Oh, so in his time, to die the way he used it meant to have a sexual orgasm.
At worst, you can knock Demeter for loving the bad boy persona, and she kinda is whack for nearly getting Duncan in a fight with Monster from Boys in the Hood and Pootie Tang. My favorite part of this scene is the real Blade giving Duncan confidence from across the room, then realizing just how annoying he comes across when Duncan uses it on him. I'm glad to see that Duncan got his confidence because he's gonna need it real soon. Wedge's boss got tired of him showing up with a new bruise every time he saw him and demanded to know who's been putting those dents in him and his operation. His boss is called Mink, and he's played by Tommy. So all you people who claim he never had a job, then what do you call this? Thomas Ford playing a bad guy always threw me off as a kid, because even though this was only 2 months before the Martin Show debuted, I didn't see this movie until well after the show started. Sadly, we lost Thomas Ford in 2016. Now you know it's not a Kid and Play movie without a freestyle. They gonna fit it in somewhere. This time it's at a drug-free rally at the school. But maybe they should have allowed some mind-altering substances after all, because I'm sad to report that this freestyle sucks. It's more offbeat than a Silk the Shocker song. What the f*** happened? Duncan deserved to be kidnapped after that travesty. Now, Class Act was already a pretty goofy film, but at this point, it goes completely over the top. But in a good way. If you thought the logic and continuity was bad before, then consider the fact that Mank and his crew kidnapped Duncan at night and then drive around with him until the morning. What was the plan here? Were y'all looking for a cut-up spot? Then there's a completely out of place car chase scene that I know put the budget over the top, but that I love because it makes absolutely no effort to hide the stuntmen. But once again, it's easy to overlook these things because the comedic dialogue is so good. Completely fed up after nearly getting killed, Duncan reveals the truth about the swap, which always felt out of place to me because they don't have the chance to really address it during this chase scene that takes place in a wax museum that Demeter works at. All kinds of Scooby-Doo shenanigans ensue, and it definitely starts channeling its inner house party too. My favorite part during all of this is the characters trying to name the wax figures they see, but they keep getting it completely wrong.
Hey, Chuck Woolery.
Yo, man, that's Pat Sajak, man.
Pat, watch. Look, man, it's Willie Nelson.
Not Willie Nelson, stupid.
Colonel Sanders.
Once Scooby and the gang top the bad guys, the cops rush in and arrest everybody. And that's how we end up back at the beginning of the movie. Our characters have actually grown and learned from their experiences, which is the mark of a good story, by the way. But don't take it from me. Let Officer Rosie explain the entire arc to you.
You know, if it wasn't for him, I never would have ended up here.
And you never would have met Demeter either.
That's true.
And you'd still be a wimp.
So yeah, in summary, they both learn to respect each other's differences and discover new things about themselves. Like Blade discovering that he's smart and entering the Knowledge Bowl. Actually, he's really not that much smarter. I have no idea what he's doing up here. Then again, yeah I do. See, the film wanted to make use of a trope called Chekhov's gun that states if you introduce something or a line of dialogue, it has to be important by the end of the film, or else why even include it? See, when Ellen told him about that play earlier, she loaded up Chekhov's gun for Blade to fire off the right answer at the appropriate time. And if you didn't already know that, then Class Act taught you something today. But wait a minute. I always wondered, why wasn't Demeter in the Knowledge Bowl? Or even in the gifted class to begin with? She's clearly the third smartest person in the movie. I'd argue maybe even the second. It always bothered me that she was in the remedial class. Let's get to the grade. It's impossible to completely cover everything that Class Act has to offer. It's filled with too many classic one-liners, scenes, and subtle comedy beats that you just have to watch and see for yourself. The movie further proved that the Kid and Play duo was a can't-miss prospect, and even with what might be one of the most perfect casts ever assembled, they still always hold their own. I do openly admit that many of the scenes are very problematic for today's audiences, but to try to put into perspective how much that didn't matter when the movie was released, Class Act is rated PG-13. It's an easy R, but many of the things in the film that makes me say that simply didn't matter back then. I won't make excuses for it, but what I will say is that if you're willing to turn off your moral compass for 2 hours and just laugh at the goofiness, then I bet you'll come away from it with a new appreciation. It helps that the film's overall message is somewhat underrated and doesn't feel out of place in today's academic environment. If you can't tell already, I'm a big fan of Class Act, and even though it didn't make nearly as much money as Sister Act did, I think you know which one I'd choose if you put a gun to my head. My grade for Class Act is a B+. For me, the movie is just as good and about as classic as the first House Party movie. And that's it for this episode of the BlackTrack. As usual, let me know what you thought about the movie Class Act in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and tell your friends about my channel. And until next time, I'll holler at you.